Hey. So can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Don't. Sometimes I don't even know. If sometimes I don't. It's okay. There we go. We're live. We're live. We're finally live. Welcome to the Wolf of Young Street Live. Today I've got a full docket for you guys. I've got a full docket for you guys. We'll be talking about this interview that Pierre Poilievre did with Northern Perspective. Northern Perspective is a conservative leaning independent media organization. He did an interview with them saying they were the RCMP. Well, in that interview, somewhere during that interview, Pierre Poilievre said the RCMP, the Canadian Police, was despicable for not prosecuting Justin Trudeau over some of the scandals that happened during his term. And today as well, we'll get into talking about the Liberals' proposed new bail reform, which they're going to be tabling next week. And there's going to be the proposal involves introducing new reverse onus provisions that will affect certain types of crime. The idea there is to keep to keep violent offenders off our streets, essentially. Will it work, or is it just another show thing that the liberals are just doing? And if we have time today, we might also talk about the Second Amendment. This was a video I made earlier this week asking people, is the Second Amendment still relevant in 2025? So if we have time today, we'll get into that. But I want to start with this interview that Pierre Poilievre did that is making waves. Um, obviously, if you guys are in the chat, just to say hi to me. I want to know I want to know how many of you are watching. Oh, Aloy Fashion says hello. Bravehearts also says hi. Hello, you guys. Hello, you guys. Welcome, 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 welcome to WOYS Live Hour today. So today I want to let's start with this interview that Pierre Poilievre did. I want to see if I can share it with you. But if I can't share it, maybe I'll just play the audio on my phone. And the idea is I want you guys to be able to hear what Pierre Poilievre said, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper. How about that, you guys? So I'll try and share this. I want you guys just let me know if you can hear it, and if you can't hear it, we'll try something else. Okay? Let's see if this lets me. Do you guys see what I am sharing right now? Can you see that? Somebody get in the chat. Let me know if you can actually see what I'm trying to share with you. If you can't, then maybe I'm gonna have to try just playing you the audio. Somebody tell me if you have to do it maybe a slightly different way here. I'm gonna have to do it the old school way and play it on my phone, and you guys will listen out to the audio. Okay. Um, in the interest of, I don't want to, I don't want to waste too much time here. So I'll play you the audio on my phone. Um, and if you're interested in seeing this interview I'm talking about, it is on Northern Perspective. But I'll play you the particular snippet that I'm referring to. And it was on where was it? Minute 27, I think it was. So I'm going to try and get it there for you. So listen up, and then we'll do a debrief, and you guys can. Despite that, she wasn't that old. She looked really worn down, but she was very enthusiastic and happy to meet me. And then afterwards, she went up to the membership desk and she said, I wonder if somebody can give me, lend me $8. And they said, what for? And she said, well, I'd like to buy membership to vote in the leadership race. I only have 7, and it's $15. And they said to her, well, you don't need to pay by cash. You can pay by credit card. She said, I don't have a credit card. And they said, well, how about debit? We could, there's a debit machine. We can downstairs in this arena, and you could go withdraw some cash. She said, I don't have a bank account. And they said, well, could you drive home and get the money? Because we're not allowed to give them out according to the rules. And she said, I don't have a home. And then they said, so you have
only this $8. She said, I only own $8. That's all I own. And I want to spend that and then borrow 7 more and buy a membership, because that is the only hope I have right now. And it really hit me hard when I found out that she was saying that, because this is a woman who didn't know how she was going to eat dinner that night. And she was going to risk what the final $8 that she needed to maybe get a sandwich or put gas in her car to buy a membership so that she could support me. And so it reminds me of how many people are out there that are depending on me to do this thing. And those are the people that keep me going and fighting on, even when it's hard, even when I'm tired, even when the odds seem against me. That's what keeps me going. And that's what motivates me.
And maybe this is a good dovetail. Sorry, that really hit me. When we think and we reflect on all of the corruption of the Liberal government over the last 10 years, and we've looked into it. They're accountable for over a third of all scandals in Canadian history since 1867.
Right.
How would you react if you were in government and you found that one of your team was involved in one of these types of scandals?
Well, they'd be fired. I mean, obviously you have to find out if it was an innocent screw-up, a one-time minor screw-up that was due to a mistake, or whether it was real, genuine corruption, self-serving corruption. But many of the scandals of the Trudeau era should have been involved jail time. I mean, Trudeau broke the criminal code when he took a free vacation from someone with whom he had government business. It's just like, it's right there in the criminal code. If the RCMP had been doing its job and not covering up for him, then he would have been criminally charged. And again, he probably violated the criminal code in the SNC-Lavalin scandal. These would normally have led to criminal charges, but of course the RCMP covered it all up, and the leadership of the RCMP is frankly just despicable when it comes to enforcing laws against the Liberal government. But yeah, I would fire them, and in cases like that, I would report them to the police. That's what should have happened, and that's what's going to happen. We're going to be at a higher standard.
Well, hopefully it doesn't happen, and nobody actually puts you in a position.
It's not going to happen in our case, because we're not going to hire people who are there to rip off the system.
All right.
So
That's a good place to stop it. So what you hear there is Pierre Poilievre talking about some of the scandals that happened during the Trudeau era, and talking about how the RCMP is despicable for not prosecuting. So I wanted to talk to you guys about that. How are we feeling about that statement? And this is fast. Justin Trudeau is no longer with. I shouldn't say he's no longer with us. He's alive and well. He's more than alive and well. If you've been here listening to the Katy Perry news, Justin Trudeau is getting it in. Anyways, I'm just messing around. But if you've been watching, Justin Trudeau is alive and well and doing his business, and it seems that the fact that he is seems to be walking off into the sunset seems to be pissing off people. Uh, it seems to be pissing off people, and it has kind of brought his name back into the news, and obviously this brings back the fact, well, should he have been prosecuted? And that is my first question to you guys today. Get in the chat, let me know. Do you feel like Justin Trudeau should have been prosecuted for some of the scandals that took place during his era? Get in the chat, let me know your thoughts there. But in case you're not familiar with some of these scandals, I guess probably the biggest one was the SNC Lavalin scandal. This one is the information on this is very much available on you can look on Wikipedia even. It's no secret anything, right? But the long and short of the SNC Lavalin scandal was one where was this situation where a certain Canadian company was doing shady things abroad. So there are standards that Canadian companies must abide by, even in their conduct abroad. And so SNC Lavalin was found to be bribing officials in Libya, as it was at the time, and that is against Canadian code of ethics for companies, for Canadian companies, right? And so this SNC Lavalin was due to be prosecuted, and apparently they lobbied the Prime Minister's office, Justin Trudeau's office, and Justin Trudeau unduly, allegedly pressured then Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould, and eventually, and the idea was SNC Lavalin was trying to get away with a deferred prosecution, which is a situation where the government says, well, we won't basically take you to court. We won't prosecute you if you do this and this and this in terms of reforms, right? And so they lobbied the Prime Minister's office, and basically got away without having to face the music for what they actually did, or what they allegedly did. Anyways, R says, when will conservatives leave Trudeau alone? I mean, the guy is gone, right? Or is he not? Well, Justin Trudeau's gone in terms of he's not in public life anymore. But as I said, it seems to be pissing people off that he is riding off into the sunset. You know, he did you? I don't know if you guys. I put this in the thumbnail, but you guys would have seen that picture that surfaced this week of Justin Trudeau in sweet embrace with Katy Perry. You know, that put an end to are they or are they not? That old talk of are they or are they not? They're definitely dating, right? So, and here's Justin Trudeau in his jeans with his tattoo all visible, and people are like, "Yo, this guy." And it's interesting how even that is so polarizing, because on the one side, some people are going, "Yo," especially those girls that like to thirst trap over Justin Trudeau. They're like, "Well, at least somebody is getting getting it on with him." And on the other side, there are people going, "No, this guy should be in jail. He should not be out here riding off into the sunset." Anyways, so that was the SNC Lavalin scandal, and then there's also the situation with the Aga Khan. If you don't know who the Aga Khan is, the Aga Khan is the spiritual leader of a certain Muslim Islamic group, a certain group of, I think he's the leader of the Shia Muslims, I want to say. And apparently, I think the Aga Khan was a friend to the family, the Trudeau family. And so at some point, Trudeau, while he was prime minister, went on a vacation, and he accepted something like, I guess it was a helicopter ride during that vacation. And obviously, the Canadian government officials are not allowed to accept gifts like that while they're serving as prime minister. Obviously, Justin Trudeau's response at that time was, "Hey, this is a family friend, and I wasn't accepting this in the capacity of prime minister. But the rules are the rules, right?" And in these two cases I've described to you, um, Killer Dave says, most unscrupulous prime minister ever. Wow. And this is where I'm headed with this, right? In both cases, Justin Trudeau was found to have breached ethics, right? And now, obviously, the RCMP did not follow through and prosecute Justin Trudeau, clearly, right? So the question is, was the RCMP I have my thoughts on this, but I want to get you guys' thoughts first because I don't want to bias you. So you tell me, was the RCMP wrong not to prosecute Justin? Were they wrong? Were they despicable, as Justin Trudeau, as Pierre Poilievre said, not to prosecute Justin Trudeau? You guys, let me know. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll bring this home for you, right? Having found that Justin Trudeau did breach ethics, the code of ethics, as a public official in unduly pressuring Jordan Wilson-Raybould, in accepting a gift from a foreign person who had government business at the time, should they have taken the further step to prosecute Justin Trudeau? And I'll bring something in here for you guys that maybe a lot of people do not know. Like it or not, And this is where I think that this statement by Pierre Poilievre is mostly political theater more than it is anything that really is going to go anywhere. I'll tell you why. Because the fact that the ethics commissioner found that Justin Trudeau breached ethics is not the same thing as finding him criminally liable. And this is something that pisses me off because the politicians get away with all sorts of shit because there's this gray area that nobody knows about where you can do certain things that are wrong, but it doesn't mean that you can get prosecuted criminally. I'll tell you why I say that. I kid you not, I went and looked on the ethics commissioner. The this is like the website of the ethics commissioner. I'll pull this up for you, and you got this is gonna blow your mind. It's gonna absolutely blow your mind. I'll read it to you just now. Let me just pull this up and show you guys, and read to you guys what I'm saying here. I asked, I went on the website and I asked, what are the penalties if you breach ethics? If you're found to say, as McCartney is in office now, he's got all these hands in all these different pies, right? You know, he was former chair of Brookfield. You know, what happens if a person like McCartney was found in a conflict of interest, was caught in a conflict of interest? What happens to these guys? Justin Trudeau was found to have breached the ethics, right? He was found to have engaged in activities that would constitute conflict of interest. What happens to these people? Well, it turns out, I'll read this to you, and this is going to blow your mind. Penalties. It says there are no penalties when conflict of interest when there are no penalties when the conflict of interest and ethics commissioner finds in an investigation that someone has contravened the Conflict of Interest Act or the Conflict of Interest Code for members of the House of Commons. Yes, that's exactly what my brain did when I saw this. Zero penalties. So as long as they don't go beyond a certain threshold, like say if Justin Trudeau had gone out and threatened Jody Wilson-Raybould with proof, and you have proof that he threatened her, that if she did not do what she was told, she would get something, for example. Yeah, that would maybe cross the threshold to become something that was prosecutable. Assuming Justin Trudeau, there was direct links where you could say, okay, he actually did something to make stuff happen, like political pressure. It doesn't count as something that you would consider criminal. It's just a fact, right? In fact, I went on to read this penalties portion of the Ethics Commissioner page, and it says here, under the Act, the Commissioner can impose an administrative monetary penalty. No, under the Act, the Commissioner can impose administrative monetary penalties of up to $500 for not meeting certain reporting deadlines. $500? Like, that there it is not the job of the ethics commissioner to find a person criminal, to find a certain public office holder criminally responsible, right? And it is their job to it is just their job to establish whether you've breached ethics or not. And in this case, you breach ethics, but there is really no consequence of this. And so you'll be surprised how many things politicians can get away with without it being a crime, right? So that's why I say this whole statement by Pierre Poilievre, maybe it's just like he wants to keep. I don't even know why he's saying it now, because at this point he's just creating a bit of a problem with the RCMP, because I'm sure if you guys have seen the interview that the announcement from McCartney on bail reform, where the RCMP were asked, the RCMP chief was asked, "Oh, what do you think about this comment by Pierre Poilievre?" And essentially, you're getting to a point where Pierre Poilievre is having this antagonistic relationship with the RCMP, needlessly antagonistic relationship, because it's not going to go anywhere. He's not gonna get them to prosecute Justin Trudeau, because as far as we know publicly, there is no proof that Justin Trudeau could be prosecuted criminally for any of the scandals that we saw. And you know why? You know how brazen these things are? SNC Lavalin, and I did a video about this a while ago, and maybe some of you might remember, those of you who've been here a while. Justin Trudeau, in his one of his final acts before leaving office, made an announcement about high-speed rail connecting Quebec to Ontario. And he said, "Oh, one of the companies that got this contract is a company known as Atkins Realis." And I said, "Whoa, Atkins Realis? Who is Atkins Realis?" Well, it turns out Atkins Realis is the new name of SNC Lavalin, the same company that was involved in the whole pressuring thing, in the whole bribery thing, the same company that he had this whole conflict of interest ethics breach with not that long ago, not even maybe 5 years ago, right? The same company, Atkins Realis, is SNC Lavalin, right? My point here is to tell you just how many things politicians can get away with as long as they don't cross a certain line. You would be surprised. You would be surprised. Anyways, but from the Pierre Poilievre angle, I think this is just I don't know why he has brought this up again. Maybe he just got asked the question and decided to say that. But I don't think it is a good strategy for Pierre Poilievre to be fighting the RCMP. And this is the next point I want to take this. I've already told you guys about the whole. There's essentially no repercussion for a politician being caught in conflict of interest. The only thing, and this only happens if I should. This might sound a bit harsh, but this only happens if the politician has any honor of their own. Usually, if you're caught breaching ethics, you would resign. But what we saw during the Trudeau era was a bunch of other people took the fall, like Jody Wilson-Raybould, like I guess Jane Philpott was one of the casualties. So a lot of other people took the fall for these scandals. I guess in the Aga Khan situation, he just said, well, he didn't realize that it was a breach and he should have cleared it first, right? So essentially, you know, anyways, with Pierre Poilievre, I don't know why he is choosing to fight with the RCMP. That is another group of people that and this actually got me thinking. It got me thinking, right? In the United States, the conservatives are famously like the ones who support law enforcement the most, right? They're the ones who support law enforcement the most. And it occurred to me that in Canada we have conservatives in Canada have a different relationship with law enforcement, and I was curious, why is that? If you're a conservative in the chat, tell me, why is the relationship with law enforcement so different in Canada compared to the United States? Because you would think that it would be all about supporting law enforcement. It surprised me that Pierre Poilievre would say something like that about law enforcement in Canada. And so in my mind, I think personally, and you guys can tell me what you think here, but personally, I think the relationship is different because maybe we don't value our law enforcement in the same way that they do in the United States. I'm not sure what it is, but I feel like the conservatives don't have the same attachment in Canada as they do in the United States to their military, to their law enforcement. But I think this is a mistake from Pierre Poilievre. I'm just gonna say that. I think it is a mistake for him to basically be creating more enemies for himself, because he is. You could tell from the response by the RCMP chief that he was pissed off by that allegation, right? And I don't know that it is in Pierre Poilievre's best interest instead of building bridges, he is burning bridges, right? And there are people who will look at that and be like, well, he did not get a security clearance, so he doesn't know stuff about stuff. So what does he even know, right? There are people who will think like that. And I do not think it is in Pierre Poilievre's interest to continue to burn bridges like that. But you guys let me know. What do you think? What do you think? I'm actually pretty curious what you guys say about this. You guys are hella quiet today, guys. Anyway, anyways, so that was just my thought about that. So as much as and just to sum this up, and then we'll move on to the next topic here. Just to sum this up, as much as you might find that some of the things Justin Trudeau did were wrong, they were they were big scandals. Certainly, they were big scandals at the time that they were reported. They're not by the dictates of our law criminal, and so you can't prosecute the man. Yeah. So Braveheart says I don't think he should repeat that with the RCMP, but but what? You can't leave me hanging like that. Come on. Anyways, so as much as you might sit there and be like Justin Trudeau did wrong, he had all these scandals, these corruptions, and I mean I told you about how SNC Lavalin came back as Atkins realist, and they're still involved in government contracts despite the scandal, you know. Yeah, all these things tied to the Trudeau government, to the Trudeau era. At the same time, there is no crime by the dictates of our law. Anyways, I want to move this on, and I want to talk to you guys about what do you guys say? Do you want to talk about bail reform or do you want to talk about the Second Amendment? I just need a quick response in the chat. Do you want to talk about bail reform? The which bail reform is the new is being there's a new there are new provisions. Okay. It sounds like you guys want to talk about bail reform, so we'll talk about bail reform. Now, the McCartney said that the Liberals are getting set to table legislation that will reform the way bail is administered, and part of what they're proposing is one where they will apply the reverse onus condition to certain crimes, right? And especially like violent crimes, right? Before, the default in basically any situation was that the court was supposed to prioritize release and over holding a person without bail. And what they want is to apply the reverse onus condition, which is one where, if you guys don't know what the reverse onus condition is, it is one where the offender, the person being prosecuted has to, not being prosecuted, but the person that is trying to get bail has to prove why they should be released instead of being held without bail, essentially. And the idea is if you shift the burden of proof from the prosecutors to the person that is seeking bail, then it makes it harder for them to get bail, essentially, right? The other thing change that the liberals are proposing here is that they want to introduce consecutive sentencing for multiple violent convictions, and they also want to remove conditional sentencing for some sex crimes. So essentially, and in case you were thinking, how is this different? Because I think one of the things I've seen online is people have been talking about how is this any different to what the conservatives proposed? The conservatives proposed the Jail Not Bail Act, right? You guys remember we talked about this a few, maybe like 2 weeks ago now. But this is slightly different. Conservatives were seeking to apply the reverse onus bail condition to basically a much broader range of offenses, right? And they were hoping to apply for the consecutive sentencing, they were hoping to apply to make consecutive sentencing mandatory for repeat offenders. So and for conditional sentences, so actually I should explain that a bit more, because I just realized that maybe you guys might not be familiar with some of these terms. So conditional sentencing, obviously I'm not a lawyer, so I'll explain it as easily as I can here. Conditional sentencing is basically a situation where, say, a person commits a certain crime, right? Now they don't serve jail term if they don't do something. So, for example, if you maybe are convicted of an assault, for example, the court might say, well, as long as you don't go around the person that you have assaulted, then you're out. You're basically on probation or whatever. You're not actually effectively going to go to jail, except you breach the conditions of your sentence, essentially. So that's what a conditional sentence is. And the conservatives were proposing that that should be scrapped, because what that does is, if you give a person certain conditional sentences, you have people who have committed some serious crimes who now serve their jail, serve house arrest instead of like proper jail, right? That's part. I'm sure you've heard Pierre Poilievre talk about this a few times. The only change that the liberals are offering here is one where they want to remove this conditional sentence for some sex crimes, right? So they're not fully repealing it. So it's and this is very interesting to me. I wonder what, and this makes me kind of think: does this actually change anything? And that this was the first thing I thought when I saw this. I mean, the legislation is being tabled next week, so we'll see what the wording actually says and what they're proposing here. But does this change anything? Is this actually going to mean that is it going to make it that much harder for violent offenders to get released, and for them to, or for people who commit crimes to get bail? That's one question. The other question I wanted to, that I was really curious about here is, you know, is it actually going to stand up in court? Because part of the balance that the liberal government has to get right here is one where they have to balance public safety, but they also have to uphold the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Otherwise, it's going to get struck down, right? That's the way these things tend to go, because our charter does say that people cannot be incarcerated indefinitely, essentially, without before. I should be able to find the right wording for you guys here. But essentially, the idea is you can't just hold a person without cause. You can't hold a person, especially when you haven't convicted them of a crime. You can't just hold a person. Is essentially my point there. And so this particular bill reform that you're proposing still has to balance that, your Charter of Rights and Freedoms with public safety. So obviously, the Pierre Poilievre has been quick to respond, and Pierre Poilievre says, "Well, this is not going to do anything. It's just more performative nonsense," he says. But I wonder, what do you guys think? Obviously, we're only hearing, we've only heard McCartney's brief highlight of it. We don't have the wording here. But here's what I think. I don't think that this will change to anything. I don't think it would change too much, because I don't know. Again, there's a lot of things I don't know right now about this law. I don't know how difficult it will be, or how difficult it is for an offender to actually prove that they should be released. Now, is this really any different to what we have now? I don't believe it is, because part of the problem that the conservatives are trying to fix with their proposed legislation is, well, there should be a limit to how many offenses a person can get to commit. Now, the conservatives in their jail not bail law were proposing, well, that's the three strikes or you're out, right? If you've committed a crime in the last 10 years, if you get caught while on bail committing a crime, then you don't get bail, right? That's what they were proposing. So it puts strict limits on the condition of bail, right? So if you're a certain profile of person, then you don't get bail, right? But I wouldn't much because it doesn't apply strict limits to how people can be released, and I see why they've done it. They've done it because they are concerned that if they really double down, they will get struck down in court. And really, what they've done, if we're being honest here, what the liberals have done is they've taken the conservatives' idea for bail reform and stripped it down to its pieces and decided, okay, this one's good, and we're gonna basically package that into a new policy with a few safeguards here and there so that it can withstand court challenge. Tell me I'm wrong. That's the way I see this. It looks to me like they've basically and they've done this for a few things now, right? They've done this for a few things. The liberals seem to have a habit of this where the conservatives, it would seem that we're being governed by the conservatives light at the moment, where the the liberals will take a certain idea that the conservatives have proposed and go, okay, this part works. We think this part works, but we don't want to do all of it. So we'll just do maybe a little bit. And this is actually a good point that Pierre Poilievre made in that interview that he did with Northern Perspective. He was essentially saying, well, because the interviewer from Northern Perspective asked Pierre Poilievre, "Are you worried that the liberals do this thing where you come up with an idea, and then they take that idea and they deliver on what you suggested and you don't get any credit for it?" And Pierre Poilievre responded like this. He said, "Well, the people need to kind of open their eyes." That's not. I'm just paraphrasing what he said there, and he basically said that with the liberals, what you're getting is not the full package of the promise that the conservatives were making. So, and he gave the example of the carbon tax. He was saying that, well, with the carbon tax, the liberals only repealed the consumer side of the carbon tax, and now obviously the industrial carbon tax was retained, and he was talking about I think it was the fuel tax that he was saying that basically adds up in the end to retaining the consumer and carbon tax anyways, and he was trying to draw that contrast and say, well, the liberals only give you the Temu version of the conservative promise without actually going all the way. So I wonder what do you for me though, I've always thought that I'm gonna say this in with McCartney. I will say this. I would rather take this version of the liberals than I would take the Trudeau version of the liberals. And I'll tell you why. I think it is more important to get something from the liberal government, to get some promises. And I like the fact that they're able to see the good ideas that the conservatives are putting forward. Fine, they're not taking all of them, but they're able to actually, at the very least, identify with some of the good ideas. And there are good ideas on the conservative side, and they're taking those and at the very least trying to implement parts of it. I like that, and I think that is the blueprint for a productive liberal government. If we say, okay, the if And for me, I would take that over them choosing to follow a strict path where they're doing the same thing that does not work. I would prefer they just, you know, took ideas that are being suggested, even if it comes from the opposite side of the aisle, and actually do something. Because I do not want the liberals to fail. And I know that might be an unpopular opinion for my friends who are conservatives. I try and stay neutral in these discussions, but I do not want them to fail because, and I would rather have something to be able to take away from however long the liberals are in power, however long Marconi actually stays. Um, I would like to have something to take away from that. I would like to say at the end of that time that this country is moving in a good direction. I would like to say that because I do not care who's in power. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I would rather have the results than a certain type of government. That's just my position. But you guys let me know. What do you think? What do you guys think? You know what I'm gonna do actually? Next week I'm gonna maybe we'll read the letter of what what the liberals are proposing in their bill reform. Maybe that will be the topic we do next week. But final topic before we go, I want to talk about the Second Amendment. You guys are game with that? You guys game with that? All right, cool. Do you the Second Amendment is basically a law it's part of the it's a law in the United States that basically protects their right to keep and bear arms, and the law says, well, it shall not be infringed essentially. So no government can take that right for the American people to keep and bear arms away. Now, my question to you is the Second Amendment outdated in 2025? I want to see your answers in the chat. And while you're thinking about that, I want to tell you why I asked you that question. The Second Amendment was instituted, so the right to bear arms and the fact that the government cannot take that right away was instituted in 1791 in the United States. At a time when the people were expected to keep arms. Every household was expected to keep arms in order to be able to fight a potentially tyrannical government, right? And even in times like World War II or something, part of the deterrent for people trying to invade the United States was the fact that, well, almost every household owns guns, right? They'll blow your head off. So, but in 2025, which is where my question kind of dances to, is the Second Amendment still valid? That is my question to you. That is my question to you. Is the Second Amendment still valid in a world where the government now owns Abrams tanks? They own attack helicopters. They own nuclear weapons. Like if you really wanted to go that far, they have nuclear weapons, right? In that sort of a world, can the people really expect to be able to depose a tyrannical government? If, say, Trump were to decide today, I am not leaving, could the people really? I shouldn't say Trump because then it sounds like I'm targeting a certain thing, and I don't want people to think I'm not trying to inspire an insurrection. Okay, I'm just trying to give you guys an example to work with, right? If a certain power in the United States were to turn tyrannical suddenly and say, okay, we're not leaving, or we want to repress a certain group of people, could the people actually realistically fight and depose such a government? Because I say no. I say no. But I want to get you guys' thoughts on this. I don't think that you can and so a lot of people like to give this example of Afghanistan and how a few men with no more than AK-47s were able to hold the mighty. Okay, so Sunshine 333 comes in and says the media in the last election made Carney look like a savior from Orange Man Badge. That is a good point. But was it the media more than it was a marketing machine of the Liberal Party? You know what I learned from the last election? I'll tell you this. Because I covered the election. As the election went by, it became obvious to me that the Liberals have a winning machine. They have a system that works. They have a marketing machine that they have a great system that the conservatives are not able to rival right now, right? It they did something so brilliant with the whole like pivoting because they knew if they had fought an election based on current events in current Canadian events like the cost of living, the unemployment rates based on inherent or prevailing circumstances in Canada, they would have lost that election. And so they decided to fight a battle against the boogeyman, right? And truth be told, that gift landed in their lap, right? That gift it was a gift from the heavens. Like Trump came in and was doing all sorts of crazy and was saying all sorts of things. And that played right into their hands. So I wouldn't be so quick to say it was the media more than it was the fact that the liberals just have a formula that works. And I mean, when you think about it, we haven't, in general, we haven't had that many liberal governments. Sorry, that many conservative governments over the course of the last 40 years. What? I'm trying to think who were the conservatives that we've had in that time. What? Brown Mulroney, Harper. Who else is you guys? If you can list the conservatives we've had in the last 40 years, you won't find that many. Whereas we've had Jean Chrétien, we've had Paul Martin, we've had Pierre Trudeau, we've had Justin Trudeau, we've had who else am I missing here? We've had you can just tell my point here is that the liberals just know how to win. So that and this is my point. And I think a lot of people make this assumption, and this is something I've said a few times. People make this assumption that the CBC is the one people like to accuse a lot. But I've put this video out recently, right? The CBC were the ones that revealed that Makani actually dropped more of the counter tariffs than was led on by the Liberal Party. But most people don't see that. Most people, I don't know, maybe under Justin Trudeau, and I wasn't paying too much attention then, but I certainly am now. But maybe under Justin Trudeau, they did show a bit more favoritism. But for some reason, if you've been watching the CBC maybe a little bit, they haven't been very nice to Mark Carney. Like they have been fair as they can be as a news organization. They actually use the words. I kid you not. I think I was watching Global News today. It might have been Global. I think it was Global News, and they said, and they were actually mocking Mark Carney because they started using the same term that the conservatives use, which is he put his elbows down. And I was shocked because that is something you would expect from YouTubers like me, right? That's not something you would expect to see on the Global News or on a CTV. But so I don't think it was so much about the media. I did have one thing that was hella suspicious to me that the CBC did during the election, and I thought that was a very weird thing for them to do. Now you can make the worst judgment that you can out of this, but at some point during the election, the Donald Trump decided to go quiet. He wasn't talking about Canada while we were going through the election, right? Someone at the CBC thought it was a good idea to go to a White House press conference and ask why Donald Trump stopped calling Canada the 51st state. And I thought, why? why was this a question that anybody wanted an answer to? I did not want an answer to that question, but the CBC chose to do that, right? Now, whether it was just someone that was maybe it's their way of bringing Trump back into the news, knowing that Trump is favorable to the liberals' cause, I do not know. But I remember being really annoyed with that at the time. That, I mean, we don't want him to be calling Canada the 51st state, and the man decided to shut his mouth and wasn't calling Canada the 51st state. Why would you go and ask him why he wasn't calling Canada the 51st state? It was so stupid. Anyways, I digress. I was asking you guys about the Second Amendment. We've got 5 minutes to go. We're live for, in case some of you who are new around here, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe. We're live every Sunday like this. We can talk about really anything you guys want. If you get in the chat and you tell me what you want to talk about, we can talk about it. We can just riff off. These shows are designed for me to just talk to you guys. These shows are meant for you guys, right? Most of the time, if I have something to say, I can record my opinion and just put out a video. But really, I want this show to be centered around you guys and whatever you want to talk about, whatever you want to voice your opinions about. Eventually, I want to get to a point where we can do a call-in show, and you guys can tell me what you feel about some of these things. But we're not quite there yet. Once I get a bit more engagement in the chat, because obviously we just started this, and I can tell you guys are still a bit shy, but that's okay. Thank you, Adoy Fashion, Braveheart, Killer Dave, Sunshine 333 for putting your thoughts in the chat today, and I hope that obviously as we go along, you guys are a bit more open to talk about more stuff, and or at least you give your opinions on some of the things I'm saying here. That would be great. But also, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do. But before we go, I want to know, as I said earlier, do you think the Second Amendment is still valid in 2025, considering that, say, you possibly probably couldn't beat, using the United States as a case study, you probably couldn't beat the military if a tyrannical government were to give them an order to repress the people. And you can make the assumption that, well, the military is outnumbered because, like, assuming maybe half the population decided to fight the government, well, the military is outnumbered 50-1 or something, right? So maybe in that sense, you can say the people can still hold their own against a better armed government. However, what a lot of people miss is the fact that the government, forget the government, there's also the fact that we live in a very polarized society now. I'll bring back the Trump example again. Today, if a bunch of Americans were to say, Trump is a tyrant, we want to depose him, I can assure you that MAGA is not going to let those people do that. And so when I describe the circumstance, or when I describe the situation to you, you're making the assumption that the government is going to be fighting the entire population. And so obviously in that case, an armed populace will win that battle easy because of their sheer numbers. Well, what if what in reality what obtains in the United States is that, well, half of that population is probably going to side with the Trump administration or whatever tyrannical government you want to pick, and they will fight against their fellow citizens. That is the reality of it, because our definition of a tyrannical government is vastly different between people of different ideologies. So that's one. So if Okay, so this is a great discussion. I'm actually quite bummed that you put this in with 2 minutes left. Come on, man. But Fox Club is asking a really important question. Why is being Canadian so important? I'm asking as a Canadian in my 40s. For me, I wasn't born in Canada, as you can probably tell. And so being in Canada was something being Canadian is something I chose, right? So I carry the being Canadian as I'm proud of being Canadian in that sense because I had to work my butt off to get that citizenship, right? To deserve that citizenship, to deserve that citizenship. So for me, it means a lot in terms of like liberation. It means a lot in terms of just like it is home for me, right? That's what being Canadian for me. I want the absolute best that there can be for this country, right? That is because this is the home I have chosen. This is where I've chosen to make my home, right? So what does being that's as I said, you put this question with 1 minute to go, man. You should have done. But you put me on the spot, and that it is a great question. It is a great question. But what I know is that I feel like being Canadian is about. I think I want to say the ideals that attracted me to Canada is the fact that I'll give you an example of the healthcare system we have here. I grew up in a really, really conservative country. I grew up in Nigeria. Some of you might know this who watch the channel, right? Don't worry, I'll stay over time because it's a great question. Now, um, in certain circumstances, what part of the things people underestimate about growing up in Africa is just how much people support each other, right? Just how much people are there for each other. And I like how in Canada we stand up for our most vulnerable people. I like that about Canada. I know that irrespective of whatever your means in Canada, you can get health care. We actually care for you at your worst. We do not leave anybody behind. That is my impression of Canada. Maybe that is a utopian view, but that is my impression. That has been my experience in Canada. That we do not leave people behind. Because I look at the United States at times, and I look at just how like I think it was like I was looking at the stat. It was like one in every four bankruptcies is because of one in every four bankruptcies in the United States is because of medical bills. That is not a thing that you would routinely find happening in Canada, because as call it socialism, call it putting down capitalism, but your taxes and mine go towards a system where that allows everybody to be able to get even if it's just the base level of care. Maybe you don't get the best care that you would imagine in Canadian medical system, but you get care anyways, right? The chances that it is a lot harder, in my experience, for you to land in a situation, in a precarious situation based off of medical bills in Canada, right? So that's one example of something that I really appreciate in Canada. So I say all this. The long and short of this for me is that being Canadian means, being there for your fellow Canadian. Being Canadian for me means, okay, so R says being a member of any country, living there means seeking its prosperity because I believe that it affects everyone in that country. Canada is pretty awesome in comparison to many countries. Yes. I like that everybody's getting all patriotic in the comments now. Okay, so one thing I should say though is that Canada is losing certain ideals. I want to say. I think when you come to Canada, you come with a dream that you can. I'll use the Poilievre line because it's pretty good, even if it paints a very fantastical view of Canada. You come to Canada with a dream that if you work hard, you can. Someone's gonna insult me for quoting the Poilievre line, but here goes. If you grow up in Canada, if you live in Canada, you believe that you work hard and so you can afford a good life in a safe street with a proud flag wrapped around you, protected by protected by strong borders, all that kind of jazz. It's really a good view of what we've come to value in Canada. But I think that, I mean, I'm looking at people not being able to afford a home right now, which that needs to change. I'm looking at Yeah, so Braveheart says, look at healthcare. I know it is not perfect. There is a wait time, but knowing that you won't be bankrupt no matter the surgeries or procedures is amazing. And it is. And it is. But that is not without cost. That is because we've all decided that everybody deserves care, essentially. However, I do think that as a country, now, I'm saying this as the person with this is one of the things that confuses people about me. I have certain conservative ideals and certain liberal ideals. That's why I have a channel where I'm basically somewhere in between, right? Obviously, during elections, I have to pick a side. but, but I will say that I think that it's a bit overboard. For example, I do not think that the criminalization of, and now we're about to launch into something else. Fox Club, what have you done? But I'll just say this real quick. I do not think that the decriminalization of open use or the allowance of open use of hard drugs was the correct decision. Now I know why they did it, and I know they did it because they wanted people to be able to access care or to be able to find help. They did it essentially to prevent people from dying of overdoses, and because if they're not using alone, if they're using in a place where people they can be easily found and spotted, then there can be interventions in place, and that the idea was to prevent more people from dying from overdoses. But I think that's too far. I think that's too far, right? So those are examples of things that I would say of situations where I would say Canada has gone too far in a certain direction. But in the end, I got to tell you, I would rather live in this country than live in the United States. And this is where I'm going to end this. I wanna tie it back to what I said about the Second Amendment. Many of you, and this is the part of me that is not as conservative as people would like. I am not pro guns in any way. I am not pro guns. And the reason I'm not pro guns is because I do not think that guns are the thing that protects our freedom in the modern day. And that's why I said is the Second Amendment, which is an American thing, but is the Second Amendment. By the way, we don't have a Second Amendment in Canada. As far as I know, you don't have a right that cannot be infringed to bear arms. Right? It is on the government to actually like pick it. I, I think that's the way I remember it, but I'm sure someone will tell me if I'm wrong about it. But I don't think it is written into our charter that you have a right to bear arms. But I might be wrong about this. But I am not pro guns because I look at the cost of the United States have of an armed citizenry in the United States, and I see I looked at this recently. In October alone, there has been a mass shooting every single day in the United States, and for me, it was like, is this really worth it? Like for the protection that you think you get from having a gun, right? Anyways, I feel like I'm going off the rails, and but you know what? We've gone overtime today, and I want to try and keep it on time. Maybe we'll get into some of these topics a bit more later. If you're new to the channel and you have stuff that you want to talk, guys, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And the idea here, as I said, is we're trying to build this community where you guys come in, we talk about really whatever you want to talk about. Fox Club did a very good thing. dropped a very nice topic that put me on the spot there with 2 minutes to go on the show. Um, but it was a great topic. I like topics like that make you actually think. What does it mean to be Canadian? Now I'm gonna find myself thinking about that now because it's a really great question. It's a great question. Um, so that's what we do here. That's what we do here. We on Sundays we just it's a free form show. We can talk about anything that interests you guys. But other than that, most of the time I just make videos and just talk about whatever pops into my head. But thank you guys for watching today. If you're new around here, as I said, please subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.